And I think we're live.
Yeah, looks like
Yeah,
we are.
we are live. So I am so glad that you decided to stay up tonight and actually actually come out and have Lrvs with us
I
because
know. I don't know whether to say good morning to the entire APAC region
you
or
should.
good morning to our friends in where I am in North America,
Oh
and
boy.
and I know you're a little bit further south, but still in the same time zone, right? In Trinidad, Sonia.
And
Yeah,
then Trinidad for sure.
awesome.
Because we are here and I'm still up. I am still awake at this time. I am not usually awake, but just for LRBS, because I love the APAC region, I am here. Malaysia has a special place in my heart because they have great shopping. I will not say how many suitcases I got when I was there, but they have great shopping, and you know that. Because I know we have
It's
Mark. Oh, we have Mark joining us from Texas, and he says good evening because, of course, it's evening on his side. Well done, Mark. Thank you for staying up with us. I know we have the APAC region just waking up on this side and making sure that they can actually you know have their full day ahead of us because
yeah,
we are going to be here for the next 3 hours and we are going to be having a lot of great speakers. I'm going to say this morning, even though it's night on my side, but I'm still going to say this morning because we have a lot of people from Australia, India, Singapore, who may not necessarily be in Singapore right now, but still we have great speakers maybe I say this evening, because this is going to confuse me because it's still Tuesday on this side, and I know it's Wednesday by them.
Wednesday morning in
It's
APAC.
Wednesday morning in APAC.
I would say, friends, feel free to chime in, make a comment
Yes,
on
and let us know where
we're
you are joining
streaming
us from.
from. Yeah, where you're joining us.
Yeah, because we would need to say good morning, good afternoon, good night, good day. I know first up we have Rafe Britton, and then we have some of the guys from Solar. Afterwards, we will have, somebody from Ecolab, and then we're going to have our panel discussion later tonight. This is going to mess with me for the entire night. Later tonight for me, but earlier in the day for you all in the APAC region. I think we have some pretty good speakers, and I know that they are experts in their field. Oh, Eric is here. Eric, good morning from Singapore. I like Singapore as well. They have nice stuff too. But thank you so much for all the help that you've been giving us over the past few weeks, months, always helping us out. Thank you so much, Eric. I know we have Abraham from Northeast Australia. Good morning. 11 a.m. Wow, we had half of your day go by already. Well
Yeah,
done.
thanks for the Northeast.
Well done. And I'm just going to check in on our LinkedIn people and see if they are joining us in because I know we have some people that love LinkedIn. We have Rob Thomas here from Australia, 10:30. Like everybody's ahead of me, but that's okay. We have Adrian from the Philippines. Nice. Never been to the Philippines. Thank you, Adrian, for joining us. And we have Dean from Melbourne. Hi, Paul. Thanks for joining us. Thank you for all of the work that you've been doing. We have Isaac as well coming in.
Australia's showing up strong this morning.
Yes, I wonder why. Do we have an Australian speaker this morning?
Maybe coming up.
Definitely do. He's gonna be coming up in a little bit, but I love the fact that we have the entire this part of the globe, and because my camera is probably changed, it's always in a different direction, and my hand is going, but that's all good. KL Malaysia, Mohammed, nice. KLCC, best mall ever. Yeah, best mall ever. So, welcome to LRVS 2024 APAC edition. This is our fifth year, Josh.
Is it 5 years? Yeah.
It is 5 years. Oh my God, we're getting old. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so it's been 5 years, always good stuff that we get to do, and we get to meet all these interesting people, especially we just met Deepo from Indonesia. Well done. Thank you for joining us. So we have Adi from Jakarta. Yes, nice, very nice. We have the APAC region showing up this morning. Well done.
Strong presence. Love it. Love it.
Strong. Because they woke up, right? They woke up early. They definitely woke up early. So we're gonna get ready to start on this side. I'm just giving people a little bit of time to join this morning because I know we are all coming in from these different time zones. But we're gonna get ready to welcome Rafe Breton in a little bit. Josh, thank you so much for joining me to do our welcome, our LRVS welcome to APAC 2024.
Awesome.
So,
Thank you, Sonia, for organizing this, and our team members in the APAC region behind the scenes,
yes,
helping out. And of course, Rafe Britton, who's coming up next.
yes.
We've got Preddy from Ecolab coming in from
Mm-hmm.
me later on. And then we have a nice
Strong
panel
panel.
at the end. Rafe, Sonia, and Lars
Yep.
from Fluidtech. So it's a nice powerhouse of people.
Always.
Do we make mention about the small change in?
We will. We
Okay,
will.
okay.
We will. We
Use your.
will. It's always a surprise here, right? Always.
Okay. All right. Have a great
Yeah.
learning session today, people. Thanks so much for joining.
Yes.
Thank you, Sonia.
Thanks for joining us. Bye.
Bye.
All right. So we have Rafe with us. Hi, Rafe.
Okay, everyone, how's it going?
I am gonna bring your stuff up because I know you're gonna talk about non-turbine varnish. So I have like all my stuff ready to take all the notes that you're gonna be, all of the nuggets that you're gonna be dropping because you know I love this topic for sure. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
Thanks,
definitely.
Andy, for joining us and for being here and for staying up and joining us for this. I know it's late on your side as well. So I'm gonna pass it over to Rafe. And Rafe, you have the floor.
All right, thanks, Tanya, and thanks for having me at the fifth edition
Oh,
of LRVS. This is my, I think, third LRVS maybe presenting,
yes,
so
yes.
it's always nice to be here.
Always.
Hey, now, guys, I've got about 20 minutes to sort of chat, and then we can have 10 minutes of discussions. And so, definitely, if you've got questions, throw them in the chat, and Sanya will be able to pick them up for the end. And Sanya, obviously, if anything comes up that you think is I should address at the time, just interrupt me. So today I want to talk about non-turbine varnish. If you are in and around Fluidtech's orbit, whether you're a customer of theirs or otherwise, or even if you're a member of the Fluidtech team, you'd be pretty aware of the effect of varnish on turbo machinery, whether that's turbines or compressors. I wanted to focus a little bit today on what does varnish look like in non-turbine applications or non-turbo machinery applications, and how much of a problem is it, and is it a growing problem? And I think there's maybe a confluence of factors, which means that the varnish issue is going to get worse, not better, for a range of different applications, and that's something that I'm seeing in the field. But there are technology reasons why it will potentially get worse. Now, I just should say from the outset, when we talk about varnish, varnish is kind of a very generalized catch-all term for a range of system deposits. So in the turbo machinery world, we're often thinking about that sort of hard baked-on lacquer that you might see in the likes of tilting pad bearings. Most of us have seen plenty of pictures of that kind of thing. But varnish is more of a catch-all term for a range of system deposits, which might include that sort of baked-on varnish, a more sludge style kind of deposit. It might even be like agglomerations of contaminants, like soot, for example. You get in engines, as an example, a lot of the gums that form might be emulsified water along with soot. as well as a range of oxidation and nitration byproducts. So, when we say varnish, maybe slightly broaden your view of what varnish is. Now, just for a bit of a recap on the technology, right, or the how varnish forms. So we've got some kind of instigation event, and most of the time in a turbine context, we're thinking of oxidation. So high temperatures plus exposure to air or oxygen results in oxidation of both the base oil as well as the additives. That sort of catalyzes, if you like, a polymerization chain reaction where radicals or free radicals sort of come together and react, and you get the formation of longer chain hydrocarbons. Those longer chain hydrocarbons are kind of what results in the increase in viscosity that you'd see out of oxidation. After polymerization, you approach the solubility limit. So I always give the analogy of dissolving salt in water. So you can keep dissolving salt in water, and at some point you reach the saturation point of the water, and any additional salt that's put in will just fall out as salt crystals. Now you can alter the solubility of water by raising its temperature, right? So the hotter a system is, the more deposits it will be able to dissolve. But as that system cools down, you'll get what is a precipitation reaction, which is where some of those solids then fall out of solution. Once the solids are out of solution, so they're probably suspended, you get the agglomeration of those particles that come together. And ultimately, when they deposit out, that's when you sort of would label it a deposit or sort of varnish. Now, this is a very kind of like generalized picture of how varnish forms. Obviously, oxidation doesn't have to be the triggering event for it. We have things like nitration, thermal degradation, hydrolysis, contamination, or even additive reactions that can all really instigate this varnish formation cycle. So a range of different ways that we can get there. And that's actually something that I want to focus on, because in a lot of industrial applications, the temperature that you see isn't significantly high, right? If you think of gas turbines, steam turbines, a lot of compressors, let's say, for example, the combustion gases which are roaring past a turbine bearing is obviously going to heat the system up quite a fair bit in that region. Whereas industrial gearboxes, that are operating at relatively slow speeds, they may only ever get to, maybe 55, 60, 65 degrees Celsius in terms of operating temperature. And so you never see the extremes that really cause an oxidative failure of the oil. Much more likely in a mining context, for example, or in cement industry, it's going to be something like a contamination event or an additive reaction, which is the real root cause of lubricant failure, in the sense of we need to change the oil. Right. Another way of looking at this is that if you want to get to varnish, sludge, or deposits, there's a couple of pathways, right? You could take the lubricant and you could oxidize it. You get oxidation compounds. The polymerization causes varnish, sludge, and deposits. Similarly, we can do the same thing for sulfur. So I liken this as, the oxidation process is adding oxygen to molecules. Sulfation is basically adding sulfur to molecules. Nitration is adding nitration to molecules, and you get different sorts of compounds. In each of these instances, right, we generally think of oxidation. We don't think of it as being a contamination reaction, right? We think of it as being purely aging of the oil. Whereas something like sulfur and nitrogen requires a source of sulfur and nitrogen, right? So either you're seeing, let's say, for example, with sulfur, often it's coming through fuel. So in an internal combustion engine, maybe the source of sulfur is the diesel. In the case of nitrogen, often, let's say, for example, in compression of ammonia, right? That's how nitrogen's getting into the system. Similarly, if we take fuel as the original product and we get incomplete combustion, we form soot, and over time we get agglomeration of the soot particles, and that's where you get system deposits in an engine. Okay, so that's the kind of the setup or the framework for understanding how varnish forms. So very, very quick conception. Now, just very quickly, I want to also talk about the base oil groups, right? So you'd be probably familiar with these API groups 1 through 5. 4 and 5, 5 is not exclusively synthetic, but a lot of the synthetics are in group 5, all of them except for the PAOs. For the moment, I want to focus on the mineral oils, though, which make up probably 90% of industrial lubricant volume. So groups 1 through 3 are the ones that are crude oil defined, refined mineral oils. Now, the key thing with groups 1 through 3 is that effectively we've got 3 different kinds of molecules, right? So paraffinic style, aromatic style, and naphthenic style. And as we move from group 1 to group 2 to group 3, and then eventually group 4, it's an exercise in basically getting more paraffinic, right? And so we are sorting out the molecules. There's some undesirable molecules which are considered kind of contaminants. That would be the aromatics and the naphthenes, and we're slowly getting more paraffinic. And the reason why is because there's a certain set of properties that we really highly desire. So, for example, the viscosity index, that is to say, a viscosity, base oil's capacity to retain viscosity with temperature, that's highly desirable in a lot of applications, especially in engine and hydraulics. And so paraffinic style molecules really excel in both the viscosity index and their oxidative stability. Unfortunately, from a varnish standpoint, they're not so good with their solubility, right? And so that's why products which are more paraffinic tend to drop out a lot of system deposits. Now, this is an incomplete picture. There are, for example, isoparaffins or branched paraffins, which are more desirable than paraffins thanks to their much improved pour point. Multi-ring naphthenes. We've also got the alkyl benzene groups as well as a PAO style molecule. And if you looked at, for example, a comparison of aromatics versus PAOs, you can see that they're almost polar opposites of each other. As we go into the naphthenes and sort of the multi-ring naphthenes, these are the materials that we're removing from a group 1 as we more heavily refine something and get to a group 2 or a group 3, where the group 2s and 3s are, for the most part, isoparaffins and paraffins. So really, as we move from group 1 to 2 to 3, it's an exercise of shifting a little bit more from the blue box to the red box. And you can see the effect that that has, right? So we're reducing the amount of solubility that we have in your formulation, but we're increasing the oxidation stability. And that's always the kind of the trade-off. Now, that is a migration that we're seeing in real time. Fewer and fewer formulations are being made with group 1, and more of them are being made with group 2 and group 3 for a variety of different factors. Now, when taken to its extreme, if I compared for example, the way that a group 1 oil tends to oxidize versus a group 4, right, which is, a full synthetic, or purely branched paraffin type oil, what you'll see is that the oxidation rate of a group 1 is usually higher. A group 4 stays a lot more stable over time. And group 4s, we generally say that they're very responsive to antioxidants. All right, so antioxidants perform extremely well in a group 4, but once they're consumed, you tend to see a rapid acceleration of the oxidation. So there's a kind of like an inflection point. Now, from a use standpoint, what we really care about is we're staying under some objective limit, right? Maybe it's the OEM has set some kind of oxidation parameter, and the group 4s, and by extension, the group 2s and 3s, are able to stay under that limit for a considerably longer time than the group 1s are. But the trade-off is that solubility. So going back to our varnish formation cycle, as we move from group 1 to 2 to 3, what we're really doing is we are minimizing the oxidation problem because we get more oxidation stability. But unfortunately, the trade-off is that we increase the size of the solubility problem, right? So we've made that trade-off. Now, in the case of, for example, turbine oils, we like that trade-off because we need the oxidation stability at high temperatures. And unfortunately, system deposits are, part of managing the oil system. That's almost a direct result of we want oxidation stability, but we're going to pay for it with solubility. And therefore, one of the approaches to solving turbine varnish is to kind of deal with the solubility problem through things like solubility enhancers. So, Fluidtex Decon product would be a good example of that. The problem is in non-turbine varnish applications, you don't have an oxidation problem, right? So as I explained, in a lot of hydraulics, industrial hydraulic systems, general manufacturing presses, a lot of gearboxes, you don't have system temperature which is high enough to see an oxidation problem. And so if your problem is either contamination or additive reactions, by moving from a group 1 formulation up to a 2 or a 3, you're not getting the benefits of oxidative stability, but you are seeing the downsides of the solubility issue. And so that's kind of the trade-off there, right? Unfortunately, you're only making the varnish and system deposit problem worse and no better. Now, why is that the case? Why is it that we are having to move our formulations? So Now, this is getting a little bit into kind of formulation science. This here is the base stock slate for ExxonMobil's what we call EHC range. So this is a set of Group 2 lubricants or base oils that are sold. Now, the base oil market tends to trade at a viscosity of 100 degrees Celsius. So using that and the published viscosity indices of these products, I've calculated out a rough viscosity index, of viscosity at 40 degrees Celsius. And you can see that the heaviest product that they sell, which is the EHC 110, caps out at just under an ISO 100. So what does that mean? If we looked at the different products that we need to manufacture, going from very light through to very heavy, we can see that we are going to be a little bit limited, right? So in general terms, you could say that the Group 2s kind of cap out, if they cap out at roughly just under an ISO 100, as we start to approach some of the heavier hydraulic oils, for example, like an ISO 100 or 150, we're a little bit limited in using Group 2 and Group 3 style formulations, whereas Group 1 is capable of going all the way through the viscosity range. So why is it the Group 1s are able to do that? So again, if I added in the Group 1 products from ExxonMobil base stocks, their core 600 and 2500 range are heavier. So you can see that, for example, the viscosity at 40 of the core 2500 is 490. So to make an ISO 460 gear oil would be possible to do with that base stock slate. So, hang on, I've mislabeled these. So the EHC products are the Group 2 base oils, and the core products are the Group 1 base oils, right? So, like I said, we're a little bit restricted here. And one of the major problems is that we are seeing the retreat of Group 1 base oils from the market. Now, this is market forces at play, right? So there are a range of very old Group 1 refineries, particularly in Europe, which are simply not competitive anymore from a pricing standpoint. What we've seen is, they're often linked to diesel production, and as some fuel production has been leaving Europe, it leaves the sort of like the base oil part of the refining plant stranded. And so a lot of Group 1 refineries have been closing down. As a result, when you look at this map, the Group 1s are steadily disappearing, and it's getting more and more challenging to make things like heavier hydraulic oils as well as industrial gear oils. Now, if we want to make a mineral oil, the approach is basically to take a Group 2 or a Group 3, and we bridge the viscosity gap through the use of viscosity modifiers. Now, that is a perfectly good solution. So say, for example, in a lot of hydraulic oils, that might even be desirable. We can use some VI improvers, things like polymethacrylates, olefin copolymers, or the sort of the styrene style polymers. And we can both increase the viscosity of the formulation, and we can get some viscosity index out of it. The downside to that from a varnish and system deposit standpoint is that when viscosity modifiers break down, they themselves form system deposits. And so we are kind of even further contributing to the system deposit problem, right? So although we are addressing the viscosity limitations, we are increasing the size of the deposit problem. Now, the other approach to this is, well, what if we could make Group 2s in a much wider viscosity range? And in fact, that is the approach that ExxonMobil have taken. They're opening a new refinery plant in Singapore, which is going to make something called EHC 340 Max, which will be a Group 2 style base oil that is much heavier. Now, from a varnish and system deposit standpoint, think about what that does, because although it improves the oxidation stability of something like an ISO 460 gear oil, what it does do is it also lowers the solubility, because we're now moving from Group 1 bright stock to a Group 2 style formulation. And so again, that's only going to exacerbate the problem down the line. And generally, because ExxonMobil is the largest global manufacturer of base stocks, where they go, a lot of the other manufacturers are going to follow. And so the substitution of Group 1 for Group 2, I think, is going to cause a whole bunch of issues down the line with both hydraulics as well as gears. Not only that, but we have additive reactions, which we often see. So let's say, for example, ZDDP, an extremely common hydraulic oil additive, which is used for its anti-wear properties, right? The idea is that it's a sacrificial additive which forms these kind of glass polyphosphate films on top of metal surfaces, which are then slowly eroded away instead of the base metal. because the zinc molecule, ZDDP, has both zinc and phosphorus in it, what we expect to see on sort of like ICP results is a slow degradation of both zinc and phosphorus over time, right? If you have an ashless anti-wear system, it'll just be phosphorus which degrades over time. In fact, what I've seen anyway in when we do a lot of testing in zinc hydraulic systems is we tend to see that actually the fall off of phosphorus in some circumstances can be a lot less than, say, for example, the zinc molecule, the zinc part of the molecule, which degrades much faster. And this is how it would look kind of mapped out on used oil analysis. Now, there are a couple of reasons potentially for that. One is, and this speaks to sort of like the merging of the application technology as well as the lubricant technology, is that in a lot of hydraulic systems, something that we're seeing now is a need for increased power density, especially in mobile hydraulics. What the OEMs are choosing to do to get more energy efficiency is to use a small oil reservoir and a smaller hydraulic pack, but put more power through it. More power density means higher temperatures. And we're now starting to see some mobile hydraulic units which can operate in the region of like 120, 130 degrees Celsius even. That instigates a cascade of events, which is that, the zinc molecule can thermally degrade, in and around, depending on the type of zinc, maybe 110, 120 degrees Celsius. And the thermal decomposition of that additive will actually result in sludge. So if you did a phosphorus NMR, for example, of the sludge, you'll often see that it's full of this stuff. And because we're now making hydraulics out of lower solubility oils, it's causing those deposits to come out of solution much quicker. So a combination. So if we take a step back and look at what's going on globally, we're seeing increased focus on using Group 2 and Group 3 style base oils for most industrial formulations. That is increasing the size of the solubility problem, while at the same time it's not addressing the fact that most of the system deposits in something like a gearbox or a hydraulic application are not oxidatively derived. So we're making the deposits part of the problem worse. What does that mean for end users? If you are an end user, I think the emphasis is going to be more and more on what can we do from a varnish/system deposit mitigation standpoint. How can we reduce the amount of contaminants that are getting into the system? How can we filter the contaminants that are getting into the system? And how can we filter out some of these system deposits and maybe do something to improve the solubility either of the gear oil or the hydraulic oil? I think that's kind of like long term, that's going to be the major strategies to success. So anyway, I think that's about the length of time that I was allotted. Hopefully you got something out of that. And obviously, if there's any questions, shoot them in the chat, and I'm sure Sanya will be able to
Oh, yeah.
put them through.
Definitely, Rafe. That was very interesting. I did take some notes, of course. I love the fact that you started off with oxidation, or why not? Um, but we do not have any questions yet. But I do want to say a shout out to Gary joining us from Boston and to Tiara joining us from Indonesia, because they're all joining in, slowly coming in for your session. I love the fact that you talked about the difference between zinc and phosphorus, because I think a lot of people get that part mixed up, especially when it comes to hydraulic oils. And I know, like, for a fact, within the industry, some people talk about having more zinc means that you have a better oil, you have a better anti-wear additive, and just showing the breakdown here of how it actually happens. I love that you were able to do that.
Yeah, no, thanks. Well, I mean, so there's a lot of misnomers around zinc, and I
Oh,
think
yeah.
a lot of it stems from like the consumer grades, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there is this perception, especially in, let's say, the enthusiast car community,
Yeah.
that more
Oh,
zinc
yeah.
is better. There is, just on that, there's plenty of evidence which suggests that anything above around 1,300 parts per million zinc can actually run you into corrosion problems
Oh
in your
boy.
engine. So maybe for a bit of background, if anyone doesn't know, the zinc anti-wear additive is mildly acidic, and obviously the more acids that you introduce, especially into a
Yeah.
crankcase oil, the more
Never
likely
good.
that you are to run into a corrosion issue. So a lot of these companies which are advertising,
Mm-hmm.
we have 1,800, 2,000, 2,500 parts per million zinc.
Yes.
You are potentially doing more harm than good. The other thing is there's only so many metal surfaces for that zinc to plate out on.
Mm-hmm.
So at some point there is kind of a law of diminishing returns, and that sort of there's kind of like no such thing as a free lunch, right? You can't
Yeah.
just keep adding
Unfortunately.
additive.
Unfortunately. But I know we have Ahmed, and thank you so much for joining us, Ahmed. I know you're joining in from Canada. And of course he loves the stuff on the zinc fluids, and he says that you are a specialist on hydraulic oils and anti-wear additives. So we definitely know that. We do have a question from Gabrielle, and he's asking if zinc-free hydraulic lubricants can minimize varnish formation. That's a good one, because
Yeah. So
that is
so
interesting.
kind of a yeah. So general answer, yes. When I kind of advise people on how to select a hydraulic oil, right?
Mm-hmm.
Generally, I give people an x-axis and a y-axis. So on the
Right.
x-axis is whether it is a standard or high viscosity index product, and on the y-axis is it zinc based or zinc free, right?
Ah.
Um, so there's kind of like four quadrants to that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you're going to a zinc free style hydraulic oil is a way to kind of basically reduce system deposits. But just as a note of caution, there are trade offs with doing that, right? Because obviously, zinc is part of the anti wear package. So I would recommend, if you're looking at a zinc free hydraulic oil, looking at what kind of, let's say, for example, approvals does it have?
Right.
So the kind of like the gold standard in the industry at the moment is probably the Bosch Rexroth test.
Yes.
The main reason for that is because when you map all the OEM tests and you look at basically the speed and the pressure that that the hydraulic pump is run at during the test, the Bosch Rexroth test is the highest pressure, highest speed test that there is in terms of piston pump durability. So I would say in very broad brushstrokes, if something can pass that test, it's generally going to be okay. Now, what's interesting is that there are very few zinc-free products that
Mm-hmm.
pass the Bosch Rexroth criteria.
Oh.
But that would be an example of, um, being able to select a hydraulic oil which is both going to keep the system relatively clean and free of deposits, but not then sacrificing the anti-wear performance.
Okay. That makes sense. And Gabrielle, feel free to connect with Rafe on LinkedIn, even on YouTube, because he's always on YouTube.
Yeah,
And bother him a little bit more if you need some more questions answered. I know Mark Newston is actually saying that zinc numbers are a good indicator of problems. So interesting. But we
yeah,
also have Hassam. He is saying that they are having some acid number in their oil samples, and the time between sampling and analyzing is almost 4 days. So I think what he's asking is if the acid number gets affected based on the time between sampling and actually sending it to the lab. I think that really depends on where you're like storing it, because like that could be an issue if it's being stored in a highly corrosive environment or a lot of sunlight or something getting in there. So yeah, we need a little more information on that one.
yeah, yeah. Potentially, the only other thing would be like water contamination in the sample, right? So hydrolysis is definitely something that drives the acid number up.
Mm-hmm.
So if, for example, you took a sample and you're somehow getting water into it, maybe there's a hydrolysis reaction going on between your sampling and when the sample gets to the lab. But for the most part, if you see a high acid number in your sample, it's probably indicative of high acid number in the application.
May not be that for days. But we
Yeah.
also have another question. Harris is actually asking if we see varnish in legacy gas and steam turbines with the new oils, and that way he wants to kind of factor out the point that new machines are producing more power for a given size and have less clearances than in the hydraulic systems and the smaller oil reservoirs, which can contribute to varnish. You are onto something there, Harris.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a combination of things, right? So
Yes.
so with turbines, for example, and obviously Sanya is very, very familiar with this.
Oh boy.
It's a combination of the OEMs building smaller oil reservoirs, so you have less oxidative reserve.
Mm-hmm.
There are oxidative requirements that they've set. Let's say, for example, with RPVOT values and TOST values, that in order to get the OEM approval, you really can't use a Group 1 style formulation. So in order
Mm-hmm.
to clear that hurdle, they've driven you towards a Group 2 or a Group 3 without realizing that it's going to form,
Yeah.
you're going to run into a varnish issue down the line. Another issue is the rise of renewables. So once upon a time, most gas turbines used to run in a pretty steady state application, turn them on,
Mm-hmm.
run them for baseload power. These days, a lot of gas turbines are running a peaking capacity,
Yeah.
which means that we are heating up and then cooling down the oil system cyclically, potentially 2 or 3 times a day. And that all kind of stresses the oil system. Now, to take it into the non-turbine arena, you know, we that is kind of like the natural playing ground of, let's say, for example, a lot of hydraulic systems, right? So a lot of mobile hydraulics, for example, they won't run all day at a very
Yeah.
high temperature. They'll typically run, and maybe it's shift work. So they do 8 hours of running, then the system cools down. Guy from night
Mm-hmm.
shift comes on. We do another
Right.
8 hours and we cool the system down. So in many respects, a lot of the non-turbine applications are sort of built to create system deposits, and we're only making the problem worse.
Oh yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Rafe. I know we are out of time and we're going to start the other session in the next 3 minutes. I am actually presenting in the other session because our solar turbine guys may not be able to make it today. So just hang on with us for 3 minutes. We're going to be here and getting some good stuff in a little bit. Rafe, thank you so much. Always a pleasure. I will see you again in a couple for the actual panel session.
Sounds good.
So we will see you all soon.
All right.
Stay tuned.
See you then. Thanks, everyone.
Bye. And we're back. Hi, Lars.
Hey, good morning.
Good night.
Good night. Yes, indeed.
Good night.
Global
Like,
event again. Yes,
yeah, it's always good, Lars.
mhm,
Always good.
definitely.
So, I
Yes.
am going to actually try to present this morning,
All right.
tonight, tonight,
Hmm.
and you're gonna have to help me a little bit
No problem.
and let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, that looks perfect.
Did you just see a bird fly away?
I didn't.
You didn't, but that's all good. Always good, Lars. Always good. So I guess we'll get, I think people are still here. So
All
we
right.
can just probably go ahead and get started. Yeah?
Okay. All right. So thank you very much this morning, Sanya.
Yes. Yeah.
So welcome everybody. I today have the honor of introducing a little bit of a surprise this morning.
Oh, yes. Why not?
Yes. Sanya Mathura to the audience. So Sanya is an amazing human being and a fantastic author, an expert in a great many things regarding tribology, lubrication, and especially from the point of benefits to the end user. Um, Fantastic to read and hear about all her stuff. So I'm sure you're going to love her presentation, and you're going to talk about why lubricants degrade and what you can do about it. Is that right,
Oh,
Sanya?
yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. We're gonna cover that this morning, and we're gonna
Fantastic.
cover that in 30 minutes or maybe less.
Nice, nice. Take it away.
Maybe less. So, what we're going to do this morning, and I just wanted to keep it very simple, is
Hmm.
that we're going to talk about what is degradation. And Rafe really put us in a good place when he started talking about oxidation. I'm like, yes, well done, Rafe. And then we're going to talk about how we could actually identify if we have degradation. And of course, what we could do about it. Because I think at the end of the day, we always need to figure out what we want to do if we actually have this issue. So, that to me, those are the three key points. And we need to make sure that we have that. So, I know Lars did a little bit of my background. And thank you for that, Lars. Always appreciate that. I'm the founder and managing director of Strategic Reliability Solutions Limited, bachelor's in electrical and computer engineering, of course, engineering asset management, so many different board positions and series editor and all of these great things. But very interesting. A couple of badges that I picked up along the way, because we like to pick these things up. And those are some of the books that I authored in particular, the one that says the Preventing Turbo Machinery Cholesterol Story of Varnish, written with Fluitech and with, Greg Livingstone from Fluitech. So that one's a great book, just saying, as well as the Empowering Women in STEM. But what we're going to talk about this morning, tonight, any parts of the day that you're in, is what is degradation. And one of the things that I always like talking about is straight into understanding the fundamentals. What are the functions of a lubricant? Because I think sometimes we forget and we figure out that we don't want to use the fundamentals, but if you don't have the foundation, then yeah, we're kind of not working that well. So the main functions, and I would say the five main functions of a lubricant would be to remove contaminants, to reduce friction, to improve efficiency, minimize wear, and of course to distribute heat. But the thing is that a lubricant can perform a different function depending on the environment that it's in. So if it's a hydraulic oil, then the purpose at that point is actually to transmit power. If you're looking at a lubricant from the aspect of oil analysis, then its function is really to tell you what's going on the inside of the oil. So in that case, it's actually like a conduit of information. So lubricants can have different functions depending on what you're thinking about and what environment it's being used in. So just some things, keep in mind. And the thing about it is that from the moment that a lubricant enters your system, is going to actually start working with your system. And that's one of the main reasons that lubricants are, thought about as sacrificial. And even though they are sacrificial, sometimes people get confused with it being sacrificial and with it being consumable. And I know Lars and I will be talking about that a little bit later on at 11. But from the moment it gets into your actual machinery, it's going to start working and it's going to start using up its additives. So at that point, it's still fine. But the problem that we have is when it gets to the point where it no longer protects your equipment. And like by definition, if it is that something is not performing any of its different functions, then it's actually failed. So in that case, we would say that we actually have some sort of degradation going on. And that's when we have the issue, because if the lubricant is not providing the function, then it's actually doing more harm than good. So that's what I want you to think about when you start thinking about, actually what is lubricant degradation. And we have the different 6 modes of degradation, which I could talk about for the entire day or even write an entire book on it. You should check that out. That's the first book. But we have the 6 modes of degradation, and it's oxidation, thermal degradation, microdieseling, electrostatic spark discharge, additive depletion, contamination. These are just 6 of the main ones because there are others that exist as well. These are just the ones I'm going to cover today. And like these are the very, I would say, very interesting ones. But just to let you know that not every time something degrades, it's oxidation, as Ray was saying before. So one of the good things we need to think about is how we could actually identify degradation. And this one is that the one that you really need to pay attention to, because while we know about oxidation and we know that it's the main star of the show, there's a difference when oxidation occurs because you actually have a loss of antioxidants. And that is one of the key things that you can actually look for when you are trying to decipher what is going on with your oil. Now, it's going to produce varnish and sludge just for oxidation, but you can also get varnish and sludge in other cases as well. With thermal degradation, on the other hand, you would start seeing temperatures increase to about 200 degrees Celsius. And for those of us who are very familiar with oil, we know that for every 10-degree rise above 60 degrees, you essentially half the life of your oil. So you're talking about oils going past 200 degrees Celsius. And what happens there is that you have the molecules start cracking, and it's actually going to be producing something like carbon deposits at the end of the day. So different mechanisms would have different types of deposits and different environmental, factors that would lead to that. Microdieseling, which is very cool, not for the equipment, but it's very interesting because they actually talk about entrained air. So what happens in microdieseling is that you actually have air being entrained in your oil, and eventually that bubble that is in your oil is going to produce varnish, is going to produce tar, it's going to produce resins, some sort of soot. So it can lead to a lot of damage on the inside of your equipment, which is different from oxidation. On the other hand, electrostatic spark discharge. Now, this one happens when you have friction at a molecular level and you actually have static buildup on inside of the oil. And that's actually going to increase the conductivity of the oil. And it will lead to produce varnish and sludge at some point in time. So that is very different compared to some of the others. And you also have additive depletion. Now, additive depletion is when you have a loss of additives. And it is a bit of a degradation process because sometimes you can lose the additives due to leaching or some sort of contamination. And your additives are there to actually protect your oil. So if you're not protecting your oil, then again, you're failing to protect your equipment at some point in time. And it's going to produce some sort of deposits. Your last degradation process is contamination. And a lot of people think that this is not a degradation process, But if you do not um, figure out if you have contaminants getting into your system, then that can actually lead to oxidation or microdieseling because those contaminants can be catalysts. So if you're looking at the bigger picture and the root cause of it, you need to be able to identify if you have any sort of foreign particles getting into your oil. So that is a degradation process in itself. So just something to be very mindful about. And what I wanted to do is to sort of compare the three main ones in terms of thermal degradation, microdieseling, and ESD. Because some of people get these three of them confused. But if you look at the temperature ranges, thermal degradation starts at about 200 degrees Celsius. But microdieseling goes up to 1,000 degrees Celsius, and then ESD is about 10,000 degrees Celsius. So you can see the difference in terms of the temperatures with each of these different types of mechanisms. So that's why it's important to know what's going on the inside of your equipment, because if you don't know that, then you can't actually like assess the problem and see what you have to do about it. But what I wanted to get to would be the different types of lab tests, because even though we know that we have these types of mechanisms, you need to be able to prove it at the end of the day. And being able to actually have some sort of evidence that you have any of these things going on, that's what you're going to have to do, because you're going to have to actually monitor that over a period of time. So when you're looking at oxidation, some of the tests that you really want to do is ruler and RPVOT. Now, ruler stands for remaining useful life evaluation routine, which is a lot to say. That's why they shortened it. And that actually represents, it takes a quantified version of that antioxidants that you have remaining in your oil. If that gets down to about less than 25%, then you have an issue, because that's when your oil is no longer protected, and you can't.
Sonia, I'm very sorry to interrupt you for
Oh,
a second. I think
yes.
your slides are actually not
Oh, they're
in the
not showing.
presentation. I think we are looking at your not at your presenter screen.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. Hang
it's
on.
first slide. Yeah,
Oh, it's still on the first slide?
yeah, yeah. I think you have to re.
Okay, hang on. Let me check. Let me check that back. I'll probably do entire screen then.
Mhm.
Share. That's a lot.
Yeah.
So you missed a lot then. Looks good?
Yeah, now it looks good.
Okay. All right. So I'm going back into oxidation now. Um, with oxidation, you have different types of lab tests. So you have the ruler and the RPVOT. And with your ruler test, it actually quantifies the amount of antioxidants that you have remaining. And with that, you need to be able to actually quantify what's going on inside of your equipment. And that kind of helps you to figure out if you have oxidation actually occurring or not. With your MPC tests, that is your membrane patch coulometry test. And what happens with that one is that it's a varnish potential rating. So it's going to tell you if you have the potential to have varnish actually occurring in your equipment. And you have different ranges for different things. So if it's below 20, then it's usually that's a normal range. Between 25 to 35, it's an abnormal range. And 35 and above is like critical. But depending on your actual equipment, you may have different values. And with oxidation, you actually have color changes. You might have rapid color changes as well. And FTIR, which is Fourier transform infrared, that actually tests for the presence of insolubles. And with that one, it's almost like you get a fingerprint of the oil itself and figure out what's going on the inside. And even though I have acid number here, and I have that for an increase of 0.3, your acid number only increases when you have oxidation already occurred in your equipment. So that is not the best indicator of if you have oxidation occurring. It really indicates if you already have oxidation that has, you know, gone through your oil and probably all of your antioxidants are gone, but definitely want to pay attention to as well. And if we're talking about oxidation, you need to talk about thermal degradation as well, because these two actually get mixed up a lot. With thermal degradation, you actually have a decrease of about 5% with your viscosity. With oxidation, you may see an increase in your viscosity. So, just one of the things to think about when you're trying to decipher between the two of them. With thermal degradation as well, you get rapid changes in the color of your oil. But you need to be able to identify this and to be able to say, yes, you have this happening. You also can use FTIR, and with thermal degradation, you actually have carbonaceous deposits at the end of all of your degradation happening. So is you're going to have dehydrogenation of your oil. So that's one of the telltale signs with thermal degradation. So something to pay attention to when you want to, try to identify which of the different things you have going on. With microdieseling, this is the one that you have air bubbles getting into your system. So if you have air bubbles getting into your system, you're going to start seeing some sort of cavitation happening on the inside of your equipment. And if you see that happening on the inside of your equipment, that is like a telltale sign that you actually have microdieseling happening on the inside, because that is definitely one of the signs you're going to look for. If you're going to do tests for this, you're going to do FCIR and QSA. And what that sort of does is that actually helps you to understand if you have what you have in your oil, because with microdieseling, you can have a range of different things resulting at the end of the entire process. So you're going to have soot, you're going to have tars, you're going to have sludge, you may have coke, carbon insolubles. So these are the things that you want to look for if you're trying to identify what is happening between either of the different degradation mechanisms. If you're looking at electrostatic spark discharge, this is the one where you have static being built up on the inside of your equipment. And what happens there is that you'd always see that the static gets discharged on any of the filter membranes, and you'd start seeing burnt filter membranes. So that is one telltale sign that you have ESD occurring, and that would usually be in your hydraulic oil systems. So something you want to pay attention to. A lot of times the operators would say that they hear some sort of like sparks or something going on the inside of their equipment when they're passing by it. So definitely something you want to take into consideration. FTIR and QSA, those help you to understand if you have any varnish, sludge, or insoluble materials involved. And of course, your ruler, because your ruler test is very versatile. They will tell you if you have any depletion of antioxidants in your actual oil. And DGA, which is dissolved gas analysis, it can tell you have the presence of acetylene, ethylene, and methane, because those are the ones that will happen if you have ESD going on in your equipment. Now, additive depletion, which is very interesting, is that it tells you if you have the presence or the absence of additives. And the absence of additives actually can give you an indication if you have your additives being depleted very quickly or not. So this is a good test that you would want to do if you're going to be, trying to assess what's going on inside of your equipment. Color is very important as well, because certain additives, they leave different colors. QSA, very important for the presence of insoluble materials. Ruler and RP Beauty will help you as well, because your ruler will help you to understand if you have any sort of depletion of your antioxidants. So that is critical. And of course, with contamination, this could be the root cause for anything that's going on with different mechanisms. Check out for your color, your presence of water, fuel, or coolants. Those are very important as well to know if you have any sort of contamination going on inside of your equipment. And of course, down to the last part, what can we do about degradation? There are four main things you can do about degradation. The first thing you need to do is be able to understand the equipment, because if you are trying to assess your equipment, and we'll go through it in a little bit, but you need to understand what's going on with your equipment, how you're going to deal with it, determine your applicable tests, interpret the results, and implement some measures for it. But when you're understanding your equipment, I think sometimes what you need to do is know that if it's critical, semi critical, or non critical. So you're not going to put a bunch of different expensive tests on your non critical piece of equipment. You're going to put that towards your critical pieces of equipment, which is like your turbines, stuff that will go down. If that goes down, the entire plant goes down. Those are your critical pieces of equipment. Your non-critical pieces of equipment, those are the ones that if those go down, they're not going to affect the functioning of the plant. So those are not the ones that you want to pay attention to them still, because everybody deserves a little bit of attention. But the critical ones are the ones you want to place a little more emphasis on, because that's where you'll get a lot more trouble when those go down. So many applicable tests. Now, these are the main tests that can tell you if you are monitoring your equipment and trying to see some sort of changes. Of course, your viscosity test is the most important one. If you start seeing any sort of changes in your viscosity, plus or minus 5%, that's where you start seeing changes happening. Either you have a decrease or you have an increase. If you're seeing a decrease, you're looking towards thermal degradation. If you're seeing an increase, that's probably oxidation. If you're looking at any sort of contaminants getting into your system, presence of fuel or presence of water, depending on the application. If it's like a marine diesel engine, you're going to be looking for those as well. Increases in your total acid number or your total base number, very important as well. That can tell you if you have an acid buildup in your actual oil, or that could go towards your equipment and damaging it. And if you have a high concentration of any of the wear metals on the inside of your equipment, that can tell you if you actually have some sort of wear going on. And that's when you need to actually look at if you have an issue happening on the inside of your equipment, and if your additives are being depleted too quickly, or if you have contaminants getting into your equipment. So these are like your four main base tests. And then depending on what you see from these tests, that's what you're going to do you're going to get a higher level of testing, and more, those are a little more expensive, but more specialized testing to determine what is going on. So the part that a lot of people miss is actually interpreting the results. And being able to interpret the results, you need to assess what are the conditions that you're seeing in your tests. Like in your oil, are you seeing like an increase in viscosity? You're seeing a spike in acid number, dark colors, no water present, being able to identify the mode, and then being able to verify it with the right type of test, because the right type of test is very important to understand what is going on with it. And implementing different measures. So you have to implement different measures accordingly, because whatever is going on the inside of your equipment, you want to be able to stop that, or to maybe slow it down in some way or another. And one of the main things you can do with oxidation is probably some chemical filtration or some sort of fluid enhancement. Lars is probably going to give us some information on that later. One of the things you can do as well is adjust the clearances, and that would reduce your temperatures, but you definitely need OEM approval for that. So make sure you get that approval from your OEM. When you're thinking about your residence time for your oils, because you have the temperatures, increasing a lot, what you would want to think about is, if you increase your residence time, you're going to allow your temperatures some time to cool down, and you're probably going to allow the air to escape if you have microdiesling happening. Kidney loop filtration, that's also a great thing to do. It can remove some contaminants. And if you have like any sort of ESD filters, anti-static filters, that will actually help remove some of the static that you have on the inside of your equipment. So those are some measures that you can take, like when you're thinking about, trying to handle this degradation process. And those are just some of the things that you can actually do for that, because I wanted to make sure that you had some actionable items. And that was it for my presentation. So I will probably stop sharing because I cannot see the screen and add Lars back to the
Yeah.
stage. Because
Thank you.
I think you got locked out of the stage, did you?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's right. No problem. No problem. Good.
I'm sorry about that. But do we have any questions on that?
Yeah, we do. We have one
Oh, we
question
do.
from Tiara.
Ah,
It's a
Tiara.
company. Yeah. They are asking if it's possible for the MPC test to not heat the sample for 24 hours.
No,
They
you
are
need to
saying,
hit that sample. I'm sorry.
yeah.
You need to hit the sample, and one of the reasons that you have to do that is that you're trying to emulate the conditions that you have going on the inside of your equipment. And by not heating the sample, you're not emulating those conditions. So you need to do that just to make sure that you have a representative sample and a representative condition of what's going on inside of your equipment. So sorry, no way around that one.
Clear. Thank you. Um, no further questions. I do have a
No,
question when listening to
yes.
your presentation, Sonia. There's a lot of talk now about shear stress
Oh,
deposits.
yes.
So where would you place that in all of that? Would that fall under thermal
Hmm.
degradation, or would that in the future maybe
I
deserve?
think I feel like it deserves its own place
Mm-hmm,
because it is slightly different, and the way that the conditions for that is a little bit of a mix.
mm-hmm,
So I would put that in a class of its own and make
mm-hmm.
sure that we study that properly, because that is the one that is almost a silent killer.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's difficult, it's very difficult to detect that one. So I would definitely put that in class of its own.
Okay, all right, great. Thank you. Let's see. Oh yeah. So I think we have another question
Oh, we
here.
do.
What quick test can we do on site? And I think this also reference what I
Mm,
was thinking, because what we see
yeah,
in Asia, for example, a lot is the availability of lab tests and
yes,
the difficulty of getting a sample to a lab to do all these tests can be quite a challenge. So
yeah.
I think that's also where this question comes from. What quick tests can we do on site?
Hmm. So there are a lot of quick tests that you can do if you're trying to assess if you have any water in your oil. Uh,
Hmm.
a great way to do this, and definitely not where you have flammable equipment, would be to use a metal spoon and put that oil in it and run a flame below it. If you run a flame below it and you hear some sort of popping, you definitely have too much water in your oil.
Hmm.
Like that's just a
Okay.
quick, easy check for that one. To
Yeah.
check if you have any sort of fuel in your oil, you can use like a coffee filter and do a drop of the oil onto the filter, and then just let that span out. And if it spans out and you see the rainbow colors at the end, you have fuel in your oil. So
Huh.
just like some very quick, easy ones that you can do. The others
Nice.
you really need to get it to a lab because
Yeah.
you need to get some numbers involved. There are only so much that we can do with all the numbers.
Exactly.
So
Exactly. So the end user should pressure the lab to get all these tests
yes,
available to them. Yeah.
definitely, and try and get them involved more because we need to be able to get our equipment running and not have so much downtime because downtime costs a lot of money.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it all starts with generating data.
It does. It definitely does.
Good. I think we're just on time
We're
right now.
just on time. Great.
Perfect. Beautiful presentation, Sonia.
Thank
Thank you so much.
you.
It was
All
a pleasure.
right. So
Thank
we're
you.
gonna break for a little bit and then
Yeah.
we're gonna come back with Prasad. I know she's online, so I'll see you all in a bit.
Yeah.
Bye.
Forward to that. See you later. Thank you, Sonia.
All right, we are getting ready to start again, and we're going to be welcoming Preeti to the stage. Preeti Prasad. Here she is. Nice to see you, Preeti. How are you?
Hi, Sanya. I'm good. Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and good evening.
And good night as well. And good night as well, because it's night on my side. But I know you're going to have a good session today. You're going to be telling us a lot more about connecting the dots. And I think
Sanya,
you, uh huh.
Sanya, I am hearing your voice, previous lines.
Oh, you're hearing me twice. Don't know what's happening with that. Yikes, sorry. Is it any better now?
I'm still hearing the voice which you said, no? Two lines, two, three lines.
Sorry, say that again. So I think my voice is what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add your slide back to the stage, and we're gonna try see if you can present.
But
So that
am I audible fine? Because I am hearing your voice only, echo is there. But,
oh, I can hear you. I can hear your voice.
oh my God, why this happens? You see, yeah.
So I think we're having a bit of an audio issue on your side. So here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna play your video. I'm gonna come back. We're gonna come back to you at the end of it to get some questions. Does that sound better?
That would be nice because see, there is a voice overlaps. Whatever I am saying,
Ah,
then I'm hearing your voice, and now I'm hearing my like 2 3 seconds before lines. Like this overlap is happening.
okay. I think the audience is fine with it though, because they say they can see and hear us fine. So I'm gonna let you take the stage, and the
Mm-hmm.
stage is yours. Yeah, I'm gonna come off the stage and give you a full reign.
When this recorded backups are helpful.
You are good to go.
Yeah.
So I think we lost her for a bit, but what I'm gonna do is I am going to get her presentation and probably share it with you all because she did do a screen recording just in case we had an issue. So she is gonna help us out with that. And I am just finding that now. All right.
First of all, I would like to thank you, Duplication Reliability Virtual Summit, LRVS organizers, for giving me this opportunity to speak on their platform consecutively. Currently, I am heading digital downstream at Ecolab. I'm certified machinery lubrication analyst level 1 and MLT 1 from ICML and pursuing this.
I'm gonna restart and we're gonna see if that's gonna work a little bit
Hello
better.
everyone, hope you all are doing well. So let me introduce myself. I am Preeti Prasad from India. I have done BTech in chemical engineering and
Good.
post-graduation diploma in industrial safety. I have a very diverse career experience of 14 years starting as a refinery professional with Naira Energy Oil and Gas, and then as a lubrication consultant with Noria India Vastrapolchi. And currently, I am heading digital downstream at Ecolab. I'm certified machinery lubrication analyst level 1 and MLT1 from ICML, and pursuing this project management professional PMP from Indian Institute of Management Kashipur. And I have published 6 technical articles on different subjects related to industrial reliability. I also got featured as a industry person of the week at Empowering Farms and Equipment page. So that's a brief about me. Now, today I would like to talk with my experience on my previous role of lubrication consultant, where I used to go at the customer side and audit their entire lubrication management program, identifying the gaps between the current practices and the best practices, and bridging them with the help of some actions, recommendations, and suggestions. Hence, I kept the title Connecting the Dots to Maintenance Best Practices. So, before diving into very deep technical, I like to touch upon very basic, like what is maintenance. So, by definition, maintenance means it's simply a process of keeping something in a good condition. Like we take care of our health, our car, and society, home. These are the day-to-day maintenance. But now, when it's come to the industrial maintenance, it's all about the machines and equipments, how they are running, efficiency, and are they serving their purpose to their best. It is an essential for a smooth operation to a long-term, sustainability. It helps to improve the performance, increase the lifespan of the equipment, reduce the costly downtime, and help in achieving the goals related to productivity. So, a well-structured maintenance plan helps uh, in achieving the maximized ROI and achieving the operational excellence. So hence maintenance become a very crucial aspect for any industries. So let us learn that what type of maintenance strategies being opted by our industry. The first one is breakdown maintenance, and it is the oldest one, I'll say. And it's also known as the reactive maintenance and corrective maintenance, run to failure maintenance. Basically, it's an emergency short term approach where something has already happened. Your equipment has already failed and stopped working. Now the team will jump to find, fix it and put the system back into the running conditions. So around 64% of the manufacturing facilities still practices this strategy. So I'll not say it's right or wrong. It's all depend on the suitability of this strategy. When it is for the standby equipments, non-critical equipment, the equipments having the not significantly impacting the production, it's good. Okay, but if it is for the entire management organization, this is the one strategy being opted. Then it is going to impact you. It's going to huge downtime, and it give an environment of unpredictability and uncertainty. When the things will get resolved, also leads to some safety hazards like that. So I personally has experienced this because my father is in electrical maintenance, and while growing up, I have seen that no matters at what is the odd hours or whether it's function at home, if something has happened at the site, transformers had failed, he will run to the plant. And I and we were also in a situation like when the water will come, when electricity will come. It gives an unpredictable environment, and the entire team and management is like on the fire pan. So to avoid this type of scenarios, both in the plant and outside, the industries had stepped up and improved and adopted a level of maintenance. I'll say it's the preventive maintenance, which is also known as the planned maintenance. So in this type of maintenance, it is a very scheduled approach where each of your equipment has been into the PM activities where the equipment your will open up, the tank cleaning will be done, the oil change will be done, your consumable parts will be replaced or replacing some parts on a certain time period. So it is basically a scheduled regular interval thing, right? So around 50 to 80% of the manufacturing facility still practices this strategy. So by adopting these practices, the potential issues are well known and addressed before it escalated into a major breakdown. Now it's give a scenario of predictability, or we know the things before it happens. But regardless, knowing the condition of your equipment, current condition, it's basically depends on the some historical data or guesswork. Sometimes it goes very unnecessary. Good parts are replaced before the time period, and somewhere it depends on the person to person experience on that part. Guesswork is there. So now to avoid this type of scenario, the industries has evolved more to the condition based maintenance, which is a combination of, I'll say, predictive and proactive maintenance, where we create a language with the machine that what is happening in the system, your machine, on a real time basis. You know, in the preventive, when we were using our sensory for inspection like touch, feel, and sound, now that has been converted into the data, that how much is the raise of temperature, or how the limits are deviating as per the permissible limits. So cloud-based technologies are used in the condition-based maintenance. So around 20 to 30% of manufacturing facilities started adopting this condition-based maintenance, and which is definitely impacting, resulting into reduction of the downtime, extent of the equipment life, and a reduction in the spare part inventory. But it also requires a huge investment, and skilled persons are required, technologies are required, and experience is required for this condition based maintenance. So this is how the industries are evolving from an emergency short term to a scheduled approach to the proactive approach. What is the impact of maintenance that we have learned? As per some data, preventive maintenance can reduce downtime by 23% and increase proactive productivity by 20% of manufacturing firms. Reactive maintenance tends to be almost twice the cost of planned corrective maintenance. And the third one, a reduction in maintenance cost by 10% results to a 40% increase in the sale. And this I have learned while taking the Noria training, that how you can reduce the 10% of the maintenance cost, which is directly going to result in the 40% increase in the sale. Let's learn about this particularly data. So what is needed? The best practices, the need for maintenance and lubrication reliability. So in a typical maintenance budget, the maximum portion or allocation is given to the replacement part and the maintenance level. And the lubricants, which include the entire practices, selection, the handling, and the entire management thing, is only 3%. But the paradox of the situation is that 3% leads to 43% of any equipment failure is contributed because of some inadequate practices, resource selection, training, planning, misalignment, incorrect assemblies, which is addressable. And the major factor which are contributor for the cost of downtime are addressable. How? So what is needed? It is the conversion of your regular practices to the best practices. Right? When you convert the normal practices, which is for historical practices, and identify that what is to be modified in that to make it as best practices, you can address as best practices. So I would like to explain this with the help of a very good case study. Right? So in 2015, me along with my consultants team visited one of the site in Sri Lanka and did the entire life cycle management audit, starting from the lubricant selection, handling and application, reception and storage, contamination control, lubricant analysis, and disposal. Based on all the three levels of what is the practices being opted, what is the thought for the management KPIs, and what are the management is focusing on this lubrication management part, right? So we, after the audit, we have submitted a very enriched report having all the recommendations, best practices, what is to be continued, where to be, suggestions like that. Basically, all the low hanging fruits. So out of that, I'll highlight just four. The first thing the management has done to improve is the color code system. They have implemented the color code system. Now the entire lubricant is well listed, right, with some color code with the shapes, and starting from the lubricant selected to the oil container till the machine with where it is going to put, right, all are in a same color. So by implementing this color code system, they have converted a regular practice of oil filling to a best practices and resolved a very big issue, prolonged issue of their cross contamination. Second, earlier the entire the machines, the bigger the machines, they thought that these are the critical. Now they have identified what are the critical machines and they modified it for a strong visual inspection, a strong sampling. So regular practice of sampling and visual inspection has been modified by installing some condition monitoring pod. You can see here, they can see the quality, what is that, wear debris is there or not. The sampling location is well defined now. And the by the color of this oil, they can see that what's happening inside the machine. So they have again converted one visual inspection regular practice to best practices. The third is that they converted a myth of kind of the new oil is the clean oil, and we simply put into the machine. Now what they did, before putting the oil into the machine, they started to filtering it out, and they have kept a very dedicated filter card for this. And also now the condition monitoring is so empowered that help in the reduction of the oil um, oil disposal, and they help they this enable the team for the lube reconditioning. Now the fourth point is that they developed the in-house lab. So earlier the practice was when they used to send this lab analysis report to some external lab, and the turnaround was around a week or 3 to 4 working hours. And what this has not given a knowledge to our groundful people or the management team. It was basically piling up the reports in a folder. But when after this audit they have understood the condition monitoring importance of that, they developed a in-house lab with some basic tests like particle counter, moisture, viscosity, tan, and all. So I'll just tell you one thing. The seriousness of implementing this was so huge that they used to import the lint-free clothes from India to Sri Lanka. So by following that, they have developed the entire world-class lube room where each lubricant is having set up with the breathers and epoxy floor of the lube room. It is well covered. So all the world-class standard. And by doing this, they have achieved the Reliability Excellence Award. This they published it as a case story and implemented on all over the six of their plants. And I have also presented this case study in the Reliable Plant Conference in 2018. So this was a huge success for the team. and they achieve their many tangible benefits and intangible benefits. So basically, they have transformed the maintenance culture from a reactive to a proactive, time-based maintenance to the condition-based maintenance. This is the journey of evaluation, maintenance evaluation. Okay. So, do you think that it was an easy thing for any maintenance team to, change the practices or change the mindset? I believe that changing the mindset is the most difficult task, right? When they approached, or any maintenance team approached to their senior management, that we have done an external audit and these are the recommendations. Most of the time, because I have done this for more than 15 industries, and I'll say that management will say that you have already spent money on the audits, right? Now it is very expensive, so they that carry forward for the next year, so it's very hard to implement. That is the condition for senior management. Middle management will say that if we train, and what if they leave, we don't have time to for doing this preventive maintenance, that thing. So that is the statement from the middle management. And the ground people, they will say that, "Are we are following these practices from a number of days. Nothing has happened because of the lubricant. So what will happen?" Like, they don't understand the lubrication impacting the machine. So I have covered all this type of ground reality check for the maintenance team in the article. Where is the gap, knowledge or mindset? It's a very interesting. You must read it. I have put this link here. So this is the struggle of changing the mindset and converting a regular practices to the maintenance practices, convincing the management team for that. So it requires a lot of efforts, I must say. So what are the basic, key points or crucial which these practices which can help you achieving the operational excellence? The first one is derive ROI. By deriving the return on investment, it is a very key factor. The first one, I'll say, identify the scope and measure the impact. Use the Pareto principle, that what are 20% critical equipment which are going to impact hugely on the 80% of the your entire efficiency and overall goals, right? Implement TPM, total productive maintenance, in which it gives a holistic approach of the inspection, the scheduled audit, evolve the best practices, and it has 6 to 8 pillars, like planned maintenance, quality maintenance, the training, safety, health, and environment. 5S things are involved in the TPM, so you can implement this TPM. Then optimize your assets. When you know that these are our critical assets, give a extra care to that. Optimize that with the modification of that critical equipment. You don't go thoroughly by the OEM given equipment. You can modify it as per the best practices. Introduce digital. See, we are in a competitive world where everything needs to be on fingertips, and we need the data for enabling the decision what to be taken. So nowadays there are so many IoT devices, monitoring sensors are available in the market. We can introduce the digital in the equipments, and that is going to help you on a longer term. Educate. So it is very important that empowers your team to take the decision and troubleshoot the equipment. So first is that you go for the slide based training, then you make some train with the help of videos, and nowadays uh, role play trainings are also coming, where it's a hands-on training where real scenarios are created, and then you educate that them. So this will think remain with your team for a very very longer term, and it helps to develop the skills of the team. And third VUI. Third VUI means the external auditors. Maybe we are using this practices, but we are not. apparent, knowing that what's happening. So third eye view is a very strong thing, having a external audits, or instead go for a cross collaboration like engineering, operations, and other team members, which help you to uncover for the improvement which are might not be apparent from within, right? Then strategize your awareness. You must have seen that in the shop floor or any plant, there are so many posters for the safeties, right? Likewise, we can also see the importance of the new practices or the best practices. Create more awareness on that part. Strategize is by keeping a reward, uh, reward, reward and recognition thing in their management. Display achievement, even a small achievement like uh, around one barrel is saved. Display it. The more you will spread the achievement, your team will get motivated, and they will empowered to do more on that part. So that awareness need to be strategized. So finally, I would like to conclude the session with a thought that from maintenance best practices to sustainable cultural transformation. So we have seen that maintenance is a part of keeping something in a everything good operational excellence and all. But maintenance can be a foundation of a cultural that derives the sustainability, you know, reduce environmental impact and promote long-term health of our planet. Whatever the practices we have discussed, each of the practices are complement to other and creating a robust framework for achieving superior performance and operational success. So what to be needed? It is a very chain way. First, you know the importance of practices, adopt it, internalize them into the habit. Once it is, habituated, convert the habit into a system for operational excellence and all. That system will result into cultivating a culture of sustainability, right? That all going to impact on our mother earth. So everything is linked and channeled, right? So So that's the end from my end. Thank you, Lrvs, for having me again and being a very patient listener to all my audience, interacting with them. So I'm open to question now. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much, Preeti. I'm going to bring you back on the stage now. And I think we have like 2 minutes for questions. So, do we have? I did not see any questions besides the fact that people want to get the presentations. Your slides are really good. So, obviously, I could understand that for sure. Um, I don't see any questions right now, but do you have anything that you wanted to say to the audience in addition to like your video?
No, no, that was, I was having another link, LinkedIn. So that is the echo was coming and double
Yes.
sign coming. So anyway, what I want to say that this lubrication experience was with me, and I really enjoyed while auditing the sites, and that gave me a very holistic approach.
Mm-hmm.
How that give a very holistic approach for looking the things on a very different perspective. So always, the third eye view, which I was talking about, the cross collaboration, the
Right.
regular audits, that helps to identify the areas of improvement where even the maintenance team can't see it,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that is my with life experience
Yes.
takeaways like that. Yeah.
Definitely. I just have Ahmed asking, how long does the entire process take? Because it seems like it's a lot.
For the auditing one.
Yes.
Yes. So, see, when I was in the Norway, it was a phase process. When I was going for the benchmarking the assessment, it usually take 3 to 4 days.
Okay.
2 days for the audits. The process is very huge, from the selection to the
Mm-hmm.
contamination, the field practices, then the disposals. Those 1.5 2 days for the audits. One day take to create gather all the data into the formation of reports, and then delivering to the customer, and training them team. So that's the on-site work. But after that also, it looks a very very hands-on
Mm-hmm.
support for the customer to how you are going to implement this. So that is also a very struggling part, when you give the
Yes.
suggestions and then follow up for following implement those.
Yes, that's a, and I guess it also depends on the size of the plants, because that
Right.
would vary in terms of the amount of equipment and the audits and the all of the red tape that is involved as well. So
Right.
to get those processes above. But thank you so much, Pretty, for your time today and for your patience and
Yeah.
for doing that recording for us and having that ready. You are a
Yes.
star. Definitely a star.
You
Thank
make
you
me
so
start.
much.
Thank you.
And thank you all so much for the audience for staying with us. We're gonna have a little bit of a 5 minute break before we have the panel session come in. So that panel session is gonna be very interesting. So look out for it.
Sure.
And we will be seeing you all in 5 minutes or so. All
You.
right. Bye.
Thank you.
So we're gonna get ready for our last panel session. I'm gonna bring Rafe on the screen and I'm gonna bring Lars on the screen because those are panelists and they are awesome because they know a lot about these things. And like I really liked your presentation, Rafe. Started off with the oxidation, started off very strong. Um, Talked a lot about the information that we need to have. And you touched a little bit on some of the things that I know we're going to talk about here in this session, because this session is all about the new technologies in the lubrication space, and that we know that things just keep evolving constantly, which is, great because we need to keep evolving. Um, I know as well, we spoke about laws, we spoke about stuff that Fluid Tech is doing and, creating that change in the space as well. So, what I want to talk and, sort of bring to the audience today is just trying to wrap our minds around what are the new technologies that you're seeing in this space today? Are we seeing more things related to formulations? Rafe, I'm gonna start with you, of course, because you're on this side of me today. So I'm starting with you. This, tonight, today, you'll do today.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, new stuff. There's always new stuff,
Yeah.
right? Trying to think of things that come to mind. So, you know, everyone's under pressure for
Yeah.
the sustainability
Yep.
criteria. So whether that's regulatory, whether it's business oriented, sometimes it's top down, sometimes it's bottom up.
Mm-hmm.
So an example would be like I get a lot more requests for bio products, um,
Ah.
not necessarily looking for EALs, but
Hmm.
looking for bio products. And at the moment, because people's understanding of that sort of field is relatively minimal, unless they come from like the
Yeah.
marine or the sort of like the water industry.
That's
A
very
lot of the time,
important.
people are just looking for like the word bio
I
to be in the
know.
name of the
That's what
product.
I'm just gonna ask you straight out. Like, why are they asking for the bio? Is it
Yeah.
that they have to put that in because of the industrial standards? Especially we're talking about in because I know you can handle for Australia. Allows me to jump in here and tell us a little bit about Asia and how that's affecting that part of the market. But why are they looking for that bio in their oil?
Yeah, so most of the time, like unfortunately, it's probably to tick a box, to be able to say that
Always,
they've
always.
done their due diligence. So
Uh-huh.
I see that in a lot of instances. So it's kind of like a CYA on
Mm-hmm.
hey, what
Yep.
if we have a hydraulic oil leak? How do we sort of like minimize
Yeah.
our regulatory exposure? In some cases, they might be close to water sources,
Mm-hmm.
town water, something like that,
Yes.
and again looking to kind of minimize exposure without necessarily understanding the ins and outs of readily versus inherently biodegradable. What are the trade-offs that you need to make when you're sourcing biodegradable products, the difference between natural and synthetic esters,
Right.
um, and there's always trade-offs with that kind of thing, right? So
Yeah.
that would be one trend,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of formulations. And I know there's a lot of work, let's say, for example, on trying to get PFAS out of
Right.
all the formulations, right? So,
Mm.
for anyone who's unaware, PFAS kind of falls under the umbrella of something that you might have heard of being called forever chemicals. So, PFOAs, for example, which, Teflon used to
Yeah.
be made from PFOAs, although that's pretty much been eliminated from the supply chain there. And the idea is that these chemicals, they never break down.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're sort of present long term and they tend to accumulate in sort of like the food chain. A little bit like, let's say mercury and tuna, right? So some of the
Mm.
heavy metals, which people can be concerned about. So, there's a big drive to remove those out of lubricants. In terms of other new technologies on the formulation side, so I do a bit of work with a company called Neol. Um, So I spoke a little bit actually in my session about
Yes.
kind of like the zinc molecule, how
Mm-hmm.
popular it is, and how it served us really well, but there are some limitations to it. For example, at high temperatures where it turns into sludge, and so Neil's doing some really cool work around
Yeah.
sort of like a copper alternative, copper based alternative, and there's precedent for that. So there's a company called Paramons which eventually got
Mm-hmm.
merged into Infinium. No, maybe it was into Infinium. They had a copper based PIBSA style anti-wear additive way back in the 1970s, which was very effective, but it was just too expensive to mass produce.
Right.
So Neol's kind of like it's not that style of molecule, but
Mm-hmm.
it does an anti-wear and antioxidant job.
Right.
Um, there's also even like new polymers coming to the market,
Yes.
or for example, like existing polymers which are seeing like new uses. So there's a polymer that Lubrizol sells under the brand Lucant.
Mm-hmm.
Dalium sells under the same name. Well, not under the same name, but they call theirs Synol, but
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of chemically identical. So it's a ethylene propylene copolymer.
Right.
And they are a viscosity modifier slash VI improver slash thickener,
Yeah.
um, which can sort of replace like a very heavy PAO as an example. So it tends to be a little bit cheaper. Um, and, these things have a viscosity index of like 300. So, for use in things like hydraulic oils, they can be very effective. So there's like always new innovations kind of
Mm-hmm.
going on. Um, and we can go down the rabbit hole
Oh
of
yes.
any particular
Mhm.
one.
So I'm gonna bring Lars into the conversation a little bit.
Yeah,
Like, what are you seeing in terms of what's going on the Asia side of the market,
yeah, I
especially
think
with what Rafe is talking about?
yeah, I think you can approach this question from various levels, right? So I think
Mm-hmm.
in terms of formulations, we have seen quite a lot of advancements
Yep.
in terms of low zinc formulations in the automotive industry over the years. We've gone to lower SAPs formulations, for example. Also, I think generally, especially in the Asian market, the availability of higher grade base stock has improved a lot over the years. Um,
Yeah.
but of course, this has also had some road bumps. I love that Rafe talked about
Yes.
polymers. I've been involved a lot in that in the past through my career in working in an additive company, so I know about Lucant very well, and also these hydrogenated styrenic polymers, which are now sometimes used in hydraulic applications as well to create higher viscosity index fluids. And also these actually have some benefits in terms of friction when they are applied to
Mm-hmm.
engine oil, so they actually contribute to fuel economy. So these are advancements that are ongoing in formulations. But I think when you look at this on a high level kind of thing, there was always a cocktail of factors like global
Yep.
availability of raw materials, price competition, different markets have different demands, end users have demands that all have kind of a limiting effect on how these advancements really get to the end user, right? And I think what we see that there's an enormous variety in performance of oils that are available to the end user. So I mean a huge difference between, let's say, a low performing and a high performing oil, and it's very difficult to discern for the end user unless they
Yep.
have lubrication expertise. So if you would ask me what is actually the biggest advancements over the biggest advancement over the last decades, I would say end user education, and I think
Mm.
all of us on this panel has played some role in that. You guys to a much greater extent than myself. But there are today enormous amounts of educational material and data available to end users, right? So they are now able to solve issues or to find out how they can solve issues like contamination, varnish deposits, how they extend their oil life. And you mentioned
Mm-hmm.
already a little bit about Fluidtech, our company. We have a program called Fill for Life,
Yep.
where we can extend the life of a fluid as much as the life of the equipment. So that has all huge impacts on finance and also the environment. So I think from an end user perspective, if I would take that perspective, I think having more access to knowledge, training, and more options to solve their reliability issue to increase their profit in a sustainable way, I think that's actually the biggest advancement we've seen over the last, let's say, decade, especially in industrial oils, I would say.
Yeah, because I think what we've realized over the definitely over the last decade is that, and this is going to make all of us here sound very old, is that we
Mm,
saw the introduction of the internet and the things that it can do, and in terms of connecting people and being able to have
exactly.
that free flow of information. So I
Mhm.
know people that are younger than us, and I'm just going to leave it at that, younger than us, may not know what it's like before, actually having access, readily available access to all of this information. And I think that the rate at which we're actually evolving, don't even start talking about AI and machine learning and all of these great things. Um, we are advancing at a higher rate than we may be able to keep up, especially for our end users. And our end users, they need to be educated as much as possible, because they're the ones using the equipment. They're the ones that need to know what's going on the inside, and how do you actually deal with the issues that are happening afterwards. So I think that part is very important for them, and just making sure that they can actually know what can happen. So I love the fact that we talked about formulation, because I think
Mhm.
formulation is always changing, because we're always getting new ideas and new ways to do things. But that doesn't happen unless we step outside of the box. And I know Neol is definitely stepping outside of the box in the way that they're doing new formulations and just thinking about things a lot differently than we did 10, 15, 20 years ago. So pushing the limits, hats off to Leah and her entire team, because she's doing a great job. Just gonna tell her that one time. But we've seen what's going on with formulations. And I know, Lars, you talked a little bit about, having that longer oil life. So do you think that in the near future, because we're moving towards a more sustainable future,
Mhm.
do you see that we would probably not be using oils as consumables in the future, and
Mhm.
rather more as assets?
Yeah, great question. Well, technically, that's definitely possible. It's a matter of getting this kind of discipline and education
Yeah.
with the end user to do that. And in essence, you are competing with the status quo. So the key here is educating the end user of the possibility. But technically speaking, in a lot of industrial oils, yes, it is possible to at least, let's say, double the life of the oil
Mm-hmm.
in many cases, purely by keeping the base oil from being decomposed through um, the degradation methods that you
Yes.
have described, Sonia. There are ways that you can do that um, today already. And I always like to draw this comparison between the automotive world and the
Yes.
industrial world, because in the automotive industry, you've seen enormous advancements in terms of
Yeah.
how long an oil can be used, right? You talk a little bit about age, but when I was young, I knew that my parents they had to change their oil probably every 7,000 to 8,000 kilometers, right? And
Ah.
now that's probably 30,000 kilometers for an engine oil that has a combustion process inside and all these enormously challenging environments that this oil has to deal with. So that's an enormous evolution. But in the industrial world, we have not seen this. But the
Mm,
technology exists to achieve a similar sort of revolution. So it's technically definitely possible. It depends
mm-hmm.
on how much ownership there is at the end user to actually implement this, and
Right.
that's also a challenge for us to offer this to them in terms of education and product availability, of course.
It starts with the education process. It starts with letting people know what we can and cannot do and
Yeah,
how we could achieve it. So I
exactly.
do have I do have a question from Miko Guzman to you, Lars, and
Hmm.
he's asking about the oil. I think he's talking about Fill for Life. He's talking about how would you extend the life of the base oil? Is it by filtering, or are you adding some sort of additive to it?
Mm-hmm.
So I think he's asking, how do you get to that? How do you get to that stage where the oil is basically filled for life?
Yeah, exactly. So I think there's a couple of phases. We have to
Mm.
start with doing preventive tests, right? So instead of
Yeah,
waiting for the oil to physically change, you talked a little
yeah,
bit about asset numbers in your presentation, Sonia. So that's a physical change of the oil, right? So we want to act before that happens. So we need to do preventive analysis. Let's say Ruler or MPC are good methods to do that. Once we have established this baseline, we now know the health of your oil. And then we can choose indeed to do filtration if that's the best option in this case. That will depend on the condition of the oil, but also the application, right? Because it's easier to put a filter unit in a big turbine than, let's say, a plastic
yeah.
injection molding machine, right? So there are practical aspects to consider. In some cases, it might be beneficial. Let's say we have increased bearing temperatures and we need a quick solution, then it might be better to add a solubility enhancer to the oil, which can quickly dissolve these deposits that are generating the heat in the bearings. We can nowadays, which is a revolution that's coming in the industrial world, I think,
Yeah.
we can re-additize oils, which is we coming from the lubricant and additive industry.
Yep.
Before this was a big no-no, but now we can safely re-additize oils. That means we can indeed put additives into your oils, which essentially bring the oil back to its new condition. So it's a reset button that we
Hmm.
can press without having to change the oil, just by adding something to your oil, which can be done in a completely safe and risk-free way. So I think these are revolutionary ways how we can achieve a fill for life.
Yeah, and it's all about the evolution and changing formulations and
Yeah.
understanding back to the beginning how the varnish occurs and how you can be able to actually reduce that aspect. So I do have a question, and I believe this one is really for you, Rafe. Ahmed is asking, do you feel that the mineral oils, especially group one, will disappear, or do you think they will continue using monograde oils, especially for marine applications? Because I know marine applications as a whole different field in that they have all of their straight weight oils because of their larger engines and whatever else they have going on that side. So, what do you think? Do you think the mineral oils are gonna disappear, or are the
Yeah,
dinosaurs coming or not?
personally, I don't
You
think
know?
they're disappearing anytime soon. The group ones are not disappearing because they're, let's say, for example, undesirable.
Mhm.
It's mostly a commercial consideration.
Right.
Right? So they're just the group one plants are very old. It's very expensive
Yeah.
to keep them running, and it's hard to justify, the basically the investment in new plants.
Yeah.
Right? And the group one, the way I understand this technology anyway, is that they usually sit alongside sort of like fuel refining. Um,
Wow.
but yeah, so the market is kind of headed towards group two, group three territory, and that's a combination of factors, right? Part of it
Hmm.
is engine oils, which generally drive the market, right? Because you remember, engine oils are probably 50% of the lubricants market.
Yeah.
So where they go, everyone else follows.
Yeah.
And lubricants, just there's not that much demand for Group One either,
Hmm.
and so that's why we're starting to see it kind of disappear from formulations. So everything's sort of headed towards Group Two, Group Three. On
Yep.
top of that, you get a lot of OEMs demanding a level of oxidation stability out of the oil
Yes.
that Group One just can't meet. So again,
Yeah.
that's another driver. So then the second question, sort of the second part of the question is, well, do mineral oils disappear completely? And
Mm.
it like, yeah, you could see that's a possibility. I don't know that it happens in our lifetime though, right? Because it's things tend to move pretty slow in this
Yeah.
industry. The way that approvals run is also pretty
They
slow,
do.
and the alternatives at the moment are just so much more expensive
Yeah.
that in a lot of instances it's very difficult to justify. So I go to a lot of plants, and we speak to the education piece, right? Where there just isn't the level of knowledge required to maintain synthetic oils and get the most use out of them.
Yeah.
So as much as it would be awesome for everyone to convert to PAOs and PAGs and esters
Oh
and get
yeah.
all the long life associated with it, you know, if you put in a fancy new PAO gear oil and then contaminate it on day one,
Hmm.
That's gonna
there's really no point,
Exactly.
right? And so because there are so many sites out there that are really hurting for people,
Hmm.
um, you know, I don't see the market moving away from mineral
Yeah.
oils anytime
Hmm.
soon. Now, just on the marine side, you know, there's definitely been changes in marine. Like if you
Oh
look at,
yeah.
say, for example, like the TBN numbers have dropped
Yes.
dramatically, but
Hmm.
that's more got to do with the quality of the fuel coming in. So
Yeah.
IMO 2020 really changed the game for
Yeah. They
levels of
had to.
sulfur
Yeah.
in fuel, um, which ironically might have made the climate change problem worse. But
Mhm.
that's a whole separate issue altogether. But um, yeah, so the change in fuel standards is in large part what's driving changes in the formulations there.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think also what's interesting in this aspect is to on the availability side, right? It's extremely difficult to produce synthetic, and it's not
Right.
readily available everywhere. And I know, for example, in the metalworking industry, a
Mm.
couple of years ago, there were some issues because suddenly the availability of Group One
Yep.
was going down, and the prices were above a Group Two for a while, so it became more
Yeah.
expensive. But there's also some need for these products still, and you cannot replace, in my opinion, all of them with a synthetic anytime soon.
Yeah. And I think as well that we go back to the education process always because that's where it starts. And if we do not educate the end users on doing that switch to synthetics, they will not fully appreciate why you have to do that switch. And if
Hmm.
they do not appreciate it, they're not going to do it.
Exactly.
They're not going to stand by you and say, okay, yes, we're
No.
not going to have anything going into this oil. We're going to protect it for our life or try.
Mm.
Um, but helping them understand what's going on with their oil, why they're doing these changes. I think education is the definitely the foundation all the time for anything that we do. But we also need to know and acknowledge that we are evolving and certain things are going to have to go away,
Yeah.
Mhm.
like those base one oils. Unfortunately, they've served their time. But if it's becoming too expensive and it's becoming more of, a cost involved compared to moving up. And then you see it as well with the oxidation numbers. Like we have the smaller sum sizes, we have um the higher stresses on the oil. So you can't necessarily ask that for an oil that was, developed back in the 1950s. The additive packages are not going to cut it.
Mhm.
Definitely not going to cut it. So evolution is very important. And I think we have so many things going on for us today in terms of everything that's happening. So we talked about formulation, we talked about the synthetic oils, the mineral oils, what's going to stay, what's not going to stay. I'm going to shift a little bit to talk about sensors. What do you think is going to happen with sensors and how how viable are they for the future? Because, and I'm just going to put it out there, a sensor at the end of the day is still a capacitance that you're translating into a particular number. Correct? Correct is
Depends on
right.
the fun. Depends on the kind of sensor, right?
It
Um,
depends. It definitely depends on
so
what type of sensor.
so just maybe to try and tie it to the previous question.
Mm-hmm.
This is something I've been thinking about for a little while. I think that to an extent, the industry needs to come to a bit of a reckoning of how do we improve the lubrication programs
Mm-hmm.
without education.
Yep.
Um, so as much as like I'm, pro educating and all the rest of that, we've kind of been on this exercise for about 40 years, and I wouldn't say that the level of knowledge across industry has dramatically
Yep.
improved. So either we have to change the way that we're educating end users,
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
or we've got to look at ways of how do we improve the reliability of lubrication programs, and just realize
Right.
that people are just never going to pick it up. And that there are a variety of reasons for
Oh
why
yeah.
that's the case. Now, I think sensors can play a part in that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if there's anything that they can do to help kind of automate tasks, part of automation is you need that feedback loop with data.
Yes.
And so, yeah, while sensors are kind of in their infancy at the moment, and there are limitations to what they can give you, credible information on, I do see them as being an essential part of kind of the maintenance of lubricants
Mm-hmm.
going forward, because to a certain extent, I think, yeah, there is a level of education that we're almost never going to get past.
No.
Yeah. I like to slightly disagree with
Oh
Rafe there a
boy.
little bit, because what I see in the market space is that the level of education depends on the value of the oil within the company.
Mm,
So if you have a power plant that has, let's say, 250,000 liters of oil, there tends to be someone that takes it very seriously.
yeah.
At least in Asia, I don't have any experience with Australia and New Zealand on that part, but I guess that would be the same or even higher. But it really depends on, I admire reliability engineers, or everyone that's responsible for the reliability, because they have to be so multidisciplinary,
Yeah.
and their main level of competence is mainly in engineering usually. And they are usually very very busy with a lot of priority. So they have limited time to be a lubrication expert, which is actually a part that is required for them to maintain reliability, right? So sensors play a part in making their job a lot easier in the future. I think to have this extra step, this extra data point for a reliability manager or engineer to get easy access to their oil condition in a way that they can
Mm-hmm.
easily interpret. I think that sensors will evolve to a way that we can calibrate them to give this additional data point. This also takes away a little bit of the pollution that we see in sampling, right? That's
Uh,
happening, mistakes being made in sampling. Um, However, I think they will, at least not in the foreseeable future, replace oil condition monitoring programs and
oh no.
the traditional way of doing things, because simply, yeah, I don't think there's a way of getting the in-depth uh, look into the oil, the data that you need
Mm-hmm.
to really properly assess the oil's condition. But who knows, that might evolve in the future.
Next
That,
5 years.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
At the
Yeah.
rate
In
that
fact,
we're moving, next 5 years.
yeah. It would be great to have some kind of a sensor on each, let's say, larger oil sump turbines that can give you an idea of the amount of antioxidants in the oil,
Mm-hmm.
the amount of contaminants, particles, and
Right.
the varnish potential of the oil. That would give the end user already a great data point without having
Yeah.
to go through the trouble of sampling and sending it to a lab. That might be a benefit to them, making their job a lot easier.
It would be.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like at the end of the day, the entire premise behind oil analysis is to continually you know, monitor a particular condition, make
Hmm.
sure that you have enough data to make an informed decision of what's going on. If are you having like increases, decreases, you're seeing things that are fluctuations, you know, being
Hmm.
able data is the most important thing, and it has been a bit of a stumbling block for a lot of
Hmm.
people who are trying to get into condition monitoring with their equipment,
Yeah.
and they're like, we don't have the budget for it, we can't do it, we can never do it. When it breaks down, though, everybody wants to do an oil analysis to figure out what happened, but at that point it's a little bit too late.
Hmm.
But still, being able to bring that level of awareness
Hmm.
to your end users
Hmm.
and making sure that they can actually, you know, I want to say read the information and interpret the information, because having the data is one thing,
Hmm.
but being able to use the data is a total different thing. Because
Absolutely.
sometimes we have people collecting the data and they just don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
So I do have a question, and I think it's Harris Hassan is actually asking. He's asking Rafe, and Rafe, you decide if you can or cannot elaborate a little bit about the unintentional negative impact on the climate change issue that you recently spoke about. But
Oh, yeah,
it's up to
that's on the
you.
marine one. Yeah, no. So the look, there's a decent amount of data which suggests that um, so sulfur emissions that come from the marine shipping industry
Mm-hmm.
um, are basically uh, kind of net reflective to
Uh,
like radiation. And
mm,
so the sulfur emissions, a little bit like
Mm.
after you have a volcanic eruption,
right.
right? You get the dark clouds that end up in the atmosphere, and they tend to cause a slight, very, very minor dip in global temperatures um,
Mm,
because of, basically radiation being reflected back into space. There is evidence that the sulfur that was in marine fuels was actually promoting that sort of reflectance. And so by
oh,
scrubbing all the sulfur out of marine fuels, we've actually allowed more absorption of radiation into the Earth's atmosphere.
not good.
Wow.
And there are theories that the you know extreme heat waves that we've sort of seen over the past 12
Mm-hmm.
months may have been in part
Uh,
caused by the reduction in sulfur as a result of the IMO 2020 regulations. Now,
Wow.
passing that out, the physics, it stacks up and it makes a lot of sense. How much is causative versus correlative
mm-hmm.
is that's up for debate.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Wasn't
Always
aware.
something to think about there.
No.
Definitely something to think about there. But we spoke about varnish at the beginning of the session. And, I am going to go back to it because, I love talking about varnish. Um, what do you think we can have going on for the future in terms of helping users to either identify varnish earlier on or even be able to mitigate against that? Like, what do you think we can put in place? Or do you think that there are things that people can put in place from now, not just wait for the future, but, how do we get to save our equipment, I would say. So I'm gonna, wow, Ray for Lars. Who do I want to answer this first? I'm gonna drop Lars into it. What do you
Okay.
think?
Ruler and NPC test for everyone.
Oh yeah.
Let's start.
Start there. Start with the monitoring of it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's really where it has to start with, right? The
Mm-hmm.
availability of tests. I think it came up in the presentation earlier as well.
Right.
In some regions there are still, and I do agree with Rafe on, in some areas you just cannot get the level of education that you need, but also
Mm-hmm.
the availability of tests is in some cases an issue.
Yeah.
So I think that's one thing that we have to think about, or that the end user also has to push for with their laboratory in the region to make a test like Ruler MPC available, or invest in their own test and oil condition monitoring program. I think that's the basis where it starts, because you cannot fix what you don't measure, right? So
Yes.
there, that's definitely the baseline. And after that, there's a lot of technology now available to mitigate varnish. The oil companies will play a role in this as well, in
Mm-hmm.
terms of changing formulation and having a higher emphasis on that. And I think they can also play a role in educating their customers on how to mitigate varnish, and engage in partnerships with third parties that are specializing in
Right.
this area, either for education or for actually solving the varnish issue at the
Yeah.
customer site. So I think they have a major role to play in this. They are the ones that are selling the oil to the customer, so they're also the
Yes.
obvious ones
Responsible.
responsible to educate the customer on how they can mitigate varnish. And they have to recognize this as well. So I think these are the major aspects, let's say, very practical in the short term, that we can we can look at. I mean, the technology is available for varnish-free oils. I don't think that's the issue. The issue is really to get the end user um, access to the right test, and then uh,
Okay.
the right knowledge to take the right action. I think that's where the crux is at the moment.
All right, Rafe, I know you want to add something to that.
Yeah, what can I add? Lars already answered it pretty well. So I think, yeah, I mean, ruler and NPC for all would be like the ideal scenario, right?
Yeah.
In practice, uh,
Hmm.
you know, obviously it's a much more expensive
Yes.
test plate, and so it's unlikely. But there are alternatives to it, right? So
Hmm.
let's say, for example, for hydraulic systems,
Hmm.
there's a decent number of kind of FTIR analogs,
Right.
right, that can get you to an amine and a phenol result, and it's maybe doesn't have the same degree of accuracy as the full-on ruler test, but
Hmm.
we've seen that move across other tests as well, right? So a lot of TAN and
Right.
TBN tests are done by chemometrics now versus like an actual, uh, you know, uh, what it used to be potentiometry.
Titration. Yeah. Yeah.
So so there's precedent for it, and I think that would be one instance where taking into account the level of training that
Hmm.
the end users have would be useful, right? Because ruler is one of those tests where, yeah, for turbine operators who live and die by oil analysis and pay a lot of
Yeah.
close attention to it, you can
Hmm.
put an amine and a phenol rating on an oil analysis test, and there's going to be an understanding of what that is.
Right.
For the vast majority of people working with general hydraulics, mining hydraulics,
No.
and that sort of work, is it practical for them to understand it? Probably not. But
No.
if we could turn like a general infrared result into something like, you know, oxidation reserve remaining, and just give
Yes.
them a percentage,
Hmm.
everyone understands a number that goes from 100% to zero,
Yes.
right? In terms of life remaining, and so that would be an easy one. Well, I say a relatively easy one to add to standard oil analysis tests,
Hmm.
without having to get too far into the weeds.
Oh gosh, yeah. Because, like, again, it goes back to your end users at the end of the day. If they are not happy and they are not satisfied and they don't know what they're doing this for, then they're not going to invest in it. They're not going to have as much, drive to get it done, because you can have, and like this is like a dream come true. You have every plant with ruler and MPC, and they have all of the equipment, they have everything available to them. But if your end users don't know how to use it or how to interpret the results, then it doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
You've
absolutely.
just wasted a bunch of resources.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it definitely always goes back
Hmm.
foundation, education, making sure people understand what they're doing, why they're doing it, and
Hmm.
maybe how they should do it as well.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. I love that idea of simplifying that for the end user. That's definitely
Yes.
would be a big step forward. And
Always.
I would also maybe uh, to throw something in here. I'm very excited to see the role of the digitalization
Hmm.
revolution that's going on now, and AI in this
Yes.
area, right? And this is really a bit of out of the box thinking. But what role could AI programs in the future play
Hmm.
for end users? Let's say that they would have a subscription, and there would be some cloud of data that gets interpreted by
Yeah.
AI, so they would always have access to a proper interpretation of oil tests. You know, that might be something that AI could fulfill if it would be, let's say, how do you say that, constructed properly and set up
Yeah,
and
trained with the
trained
right
properly. Yeah,
individuals.
yeah,
Yes, right,
exactly.
the right models. Because I think
Yeah.
one of the drawbacks with AI is being able to train the model
Hmm.
with the information and the data that we currently have,
Hmm.
because these three models here can think very differently and think outside of the box compared to what is programmed into an AI
Yeah.
software, and
Yeah.
that's what makes us different.
Yeah.
That's what
Exactly.
sets us apart.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
maybe you get a clone in the future. I don't know. Supposed to happen.
That'll be after my retirement then.
Oh boy. Okay, yes, after you've gotten all of the information. Yes, perfect, Lars. Perfect. And I just wanna bring it back. I'm gonna bring it back to you, Rafe. We always talk about the basics of oil is that you need to keep it clean. You need to always make sure it doesn't have any water, keep it clean, keep it dry. How do you think those very simple measures can be adapted to, you know, new technology? How do we get more people aware of just doing the basics right and getting that done? I know it comes back to education, but still, I'm going to throw that to you.
Yeah. So maybe to tie it into the idea of sensors, right? I don't think we need to
Mm,
reinvent the wheel, but um, even to just to make particle counts more visible,
yeah,
right? So there's plenty of inline particle counters that are available now.
right.
Yeah, they're a little bit expensive, but
Yeah.
they can at least display particle count as a number, right?
Hmm.
And everyone gets the idea of number goes down is good, right?
Right.
That's
Yep.
relatively simple concept. But the power of that is, let's say for example, like tons of sites that I would go to have a little filter cart that they run around with,
Right.
right? Plug into different systems, and
Hmm.
you kind of always you point at the filter cart and say, well, how long do you put that on the hydraulic unit?
Yes.
They say 12 hours or 24 hours or
Mm-hmm.
whatever the number is, and a very basic question. Well, how do you know that that's long enough, right? Where was the particle count and where is
Right.
it now that you've finished with your filtration? And in general, there is no sense of like what is dirty and what is clean, simply
Hmm.
because there's no representation of the numbers.
Right.
Versus, we plug in the unit and it's reading a whatever it is, 25, 23, you know, 18 or something like that. And then after a number of hours, that number has gone down
Right.
to whatever is the site acceptable level, 16,
Hmm.
14, 11, or whatever it might be. So part of it's just simply making that visible, right? And
Hmm.
now we've got inline particle counters, we've got the relative humidity sensors, and so in terms of keeping it clean and dry, that's
Yep.
2 out of 3, right?
Yeah.
And a temperature sensor is very cheap, so keeping
That's,
it clean, cool, and dry, all of a sudden you can sort of achieve all 3 of those things. But without the visibility on the number,
yeah.
you kind of
There's
chasing
nothing.
ghosts. So that's one area where it's not like a revolutionary new technology.
Hmm.
Inline particle counters have been around for a while, but
Yep.
you know, uh, their use could definitely be expanded.
Oh yeah. Laws. Do you want to add anything to that?
No, I don't. I think Reeve covered it pretty well.
Yeah.
I just, in general, I think it's a great idea and initiative that I hope would be picked up to
Yeah.
basically simplify the way that end users, especially in the hydraulic segment,
Yeah.
can do an oil analysis test that's relevant to them, that gives them a data point to act on, because that's generally speaking a, let's say, a limitation that we see in particularly that market. We now
Hmm.
really, when we talk to the hydraulic industry, or people that use hydraulics, we tend to talk more about the mechanical aspects
Hmm.
that they see as a result of um, oil degradation, instead of really looking at the oil itself, because simply there's no knowledge or no access to data for them in many cases. So
Yeah. So I always
hopefully,
say, yeah, take it back to the basics,
yeah,
back to the foundations. Make sure you get those three main things right. And they're not difficult to do though, but they are difficult things to get people to start to do
yeah,
and to start to think about it and the effects that it can actually have on your system. So just get the basics right before you
mm-hmm.
go into advanced AI and all of these sensors and all of these great things. Just get the basics right. That's
Yeah.
that's the main thing that you need to do. So I don't see any other questions from our audience, but I know Mark, thank you for staying up with us. Let me just say that. He was talking about the cost of sensors, maybe a big reason why they're not being installed. And I think that may have some part to play. I think as well another part to play is change, and the humans resist change as much as possible, especially in this industry. We do not like it one bit.
Mhm.
And if we start seeing things changing, we're like, nope, nope, we're not going to do that.
Mhm.
So I think that culture goes back to culture as well. Culture has a lot to do with it, as you know. Definitely, culture is the one that drives it as well. So, do we? I know, Neol couple, they're doing a lot of things, you know, definitely thinking outside of the box in terms of formulation. We spoke a little bit about sensors. We spoke a little bit about the basics, the actual basics. Is there anything else you all want to talk about in terms of the new technologies that we actually have in the lubrication space? Because I think we are evolving on all different aspects.
Mhm.
The starting off with the oil, first and foremost, next to the monitoring of the oil
Mhm.
sensors, and then actually having it running in the machine while it's in operation. So I
Mhm.
think those are kind of the main things that we could focus on with lubrication technologies. The other
Mhm.
main thing is education, and we know that's the part that we need to get down very much to make
Yeah,
sure a lot of more people understand it. And Mark is saying the basics are the most important. Yes,
I agree.
definitely,
Yeah. I
definitely the
think
most
in
important.
terms of that behavioral aspect and innovation, we can now also better calculate and chart, let's say, the benefits to the end user. I think there are more tools available nowadays to do this. So um, I talk about value of oil, right? For a
Yeah.
power plant, that's very clear. That's why I used that example earlier. But when you go to a hydraulic, let's say plastic injection molding
Hmm.
uh, plant that maybe has 2,000 liters of oil in operation, right? To them, it's just much less of a uh,
Yeah.
visible, tangible value that they have in their systems, and they don't know that they can have much less mechanical issues and much
Yeah.
higher profitability. And now we can calculate that based on fixed calculations that we have set up together with universities. We call we use what we call a value impact calculator for that.
Hmm.
And the numbers we are getting out of that is surprising. You know, even with smaller volumes of oil,
Right.
if you are able to increase reliability, it's the savings are enormous, and that would make that behavioral change. If we, let's say, incorporate that also in the education, that would make that behavioral change easier, and maybe an investment in extra oil condition monitoring programs or sensors, would make that more viable from a managerial level, because of course they also have to get the approval from
Yeah.
whoever managing the company to do an extra investment. So it's not just unwillingness to change, but it's often also a commercial aspect and managers that don't see the value. So I think that's also an important part of innovation, that we have to use all available tools to
Yep.
make visible to the end user what is, or to the company, let's say, not even just the end user in terms of the reliability engineer, but the company that is operating the machines on even a C-suite level. What are the benefits on a sustainability aspect, in the sustainability area, but also the profitability area? I think there's a lot we can do with technology there as well.
Yes. Yeah. Definitely. Ray, if you want to add anything to that.
Not hugely. I think, I mean, it's mostly been covered. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of really cool like new toys and new technology out there.
Yep.
It's my experience is it's more how well is it implemented in the field
Mm.
that is often the determining factor in whether this stuff is successful or not.
Hmm.
So you know, even if we extended beyond sort of liquid lubricants into the greasing world, right?
Oh yeah.
Uh, like there's a whole
That's a whole
realm
different
Yeah.
different
of
thing.
incorrect greasing practices, um, and new technologies out there, right?
Yep.
Like all these ultrasonic systems which can
Hmm.
dispense grease based on feedback from the bearing. Um, like huge advance.
Yep.
Um, but
Hmm.
you know,
Yeah,
I've
compared
had
to the screwdriver that I used
yeah,
before.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But I've heard mixed things about their implementation in the field as well, right? So
Hmm.
um, a lot of this comes back to are we getting the basics right?
Hmm. Always, always with the basics. You have to get the basics right.
Hmm.
Yeah.
How,
Yeah.
how do you see the genuine question that I have? How do you see the involvement of materials influencing the lubrication space? I was at a tribology conference in Japan a year ago,
Hmm.
and there were people saying there, oh, and in sometime in the future there will be no more need for lubricant. And I
Mm,
don't think I believe that, but I just
Yeah.
would like to hear
yeah,
your thoughts
I
on
mean,
that.
again, like it's possible, but maybe just not in our
Mhm.
lifetime,
yeah,
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We're talking. I mean, I go to sites sometimes where the assets that are in use were built in the 1940s still, and they're still
Mhm.
functioning
yep,
perfectly well.
yep,
So that suggests that there are assets out there which have been commissioned this year, which won't get taken out of service for another 70 years, 70,
Yeah.
80
hmm,
years, right? So to an extent, yeah, maybe the volumes will drop. I can't see it vanishing completely in our
yeah,
lifetime. Now, from
Mhm.
this is something that I always try to tell people is that from a career standpoint, if you are in the lubricants industry, right, the number of people is shrinking faster than the volume is.
Yeah.
So if you're worried about a career, just know that the unit volume per person is going up, right? So in terms of career opportunity,
Reassuring.
you're fine, right?
oh
Now, how does
gosh.
that progress long term?
Hmm.
No one's got a perfect crystal ball, but um, yeah. So, like, let's say, for example, with materials, I see that sort of affecting maybe lubricant selection maybe a little bit more
Hmm.
than completely removing lubricants altogether. So, an example might be with tighter manufacturing tolerances. The gearbox surface finish has gotten dramatically better,
Yep.
and
Mhm.
with improved surface texture, hey, you can start to reduce the viscosity of the oil that you're using,
Hmm.
or with reduced amounts of backlash. Like if you look at wind turbine gearboxes and how well they're manufactured now, um, most of the next generation wind turbine gear oils have kind of eliminated or almost done away with sulfurized olefins as an
Yep.
extreme pressure additive, right?
Mhm.
They're generally heterocyclic amines and sort of ashless phosphorus is the anti-wear combination. So and that is a direct result of the wind turbine gearbox manufacturers being able to manufacture to such tight tolerances, right?
Yeah.
Very little backlash on such an enormous gearbox.
Yeah.
Um, so I see that piece evolving, but getting rid of lubricants altogether is,
Yeah.
and the good news is, even if they got rid of lubricants altogether, I mean, tribology is the
Can be.
understanding of how materials,
Yeah.
interact, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that'll
Yep.
be and that'll be there forever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because like a lot of people don't realize that you do have tribology with different aspects of your life, like chocolate or even clothes or anything that moves. You know, that's what it is. You have to make
Yeah.
sure that you have that. So it doesn't just apply to oil. I mean, we know about it for oil because like we work in it and
Mhm.
everything is about reducing friction. But at the end of the day, it can be applied to so many different things. So I really don't think lubricants are gonna go away per se right now. I
Mhm.
think that we have a culture of being resistant to change. So it's going to take a lot more for us to get there as a mindset before we get there, you know, physically and actually have that conversation because there are, as Rafe said, there are assets that have been around for more than 70 years. And the way that, I mean, if you look at manufacturing processes from back then to now, that's another question that we need to ask if they are being built to that standard anymore. But topic of a different conversation there, totally different. But
Yeah.
definitely, culture plays a big part in it. Just being able to have that mindset and getting people to understand that. So I think, and like Mark says, there's always going to be friction. Always, we live in, on this planet, so there is going to be friction unless we move to another one. But we can't say that right now.
Yeah.
But I know I don't see any more questions from the audience. But I just wanna, I think we're gonna wrap up here. for the night on my side. I know you
Yeah.
are getting close to lunchtime on your side, so that's always a good time to wrap up. I will not stand between somebody and lunch for sure.
I want to
Um,
stand between you and sleep as well. So
that
that's
is good. Totally good. I love that.
we
Perfect.
agree. No, no friction at all.
No friction. It's see, Mark, no friction as well.
Yeah.
But thank you all so much for your time, Rafe and Lars. You know, I always love chatting with you all.
No
Can't wait to
worries.
see you all again in person sometime soon. Hopefully sometime soon. But always good chatting with two of you. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us because you all are gatekeepers in this industry, and you all definitely know what's going on with everything that's happening. I want to thank as well Preeti Prasad for presenting earlier and sharing all of her knowledge, and to our guys from Solar who could not make it today. We probably will have you back at some point in time, and look out for that. Look out for that one. We are going to be having another LRVS EMEA for Europe and the Middle East. The date for that will be on the 6th of November from 9 a.m. to 12 noon Central European time. I do not know what time that'll be for me, but I know what time I'll be in Europe. So, and I know Mark is asking me about some certificates of attendance. We will try and sort you out, Mark. Just send me a quick email and I will figure that out. But thank you all for everybody who stayed up, past your bedtime, or if you had this time during the day, thank you all so much for just staying with us and for always supporting LRVS. We will have the recordings up by the end of the week. Um, I believe they'll be available on YouTube from the moment I close this off. But we will have the actual other recordings by the end of the week. And just thank you all so much for your support because without you, we do not have LRVS. So I know Raj is coming in. And thank you, Raj, because I know you're in Singapore. Have a good day ahead. And thank you all so much. And we will
Thank
be
you.
seeing you around. Yeah?
Thanks, everyone.
All right.
Thanks, Daniel.
Bye.
Take care.